Hello, I'm Matt Kelly.
And I'm Matt Dancona.
And this is the Two Matts for the week ending Friday, the 15th of September. Just a couple of cool froods that always know where the towels are. What the hell does this mean? What does that mean? What's a frood?
It's a reference to the Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy, of which more anon.
I've just exposed my lack of knowledge of Douglas Adams' masterpiece.
It's a dog whistle to Hitchhiker's fans.
All right. So anyway, what did we talk about in this
episode?
Well,
we talked about Joe Biden, health thereof, and I think more importantly, the impeachment inquiry against him.
Yeah.
And then we moved on to Elon Musk, the new biography by Walter Isaacson, and specifically Elon's love of Douglas Adams' Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy.
We did. And we also touched on a marvellous exhibition you've been to see at the V&A.
Yeah, the Chanel, excellent stuff.
And devil dogs.
Yes, and what to do about them.
Yes, indeed. Well, we came to a fairly stark conclusion about that. But
I'm
you'll have to listen.
But you'll have to listen to find
out.
So
what are we going to call this episode?
Joe and Elon?
Sleepy Joe and Doo-Lally Don? Or Sleepy Joe or Doo-Lally Don?
Sleepy Joe or Doo-Lally Don.
Is that okay?
I think that's excellent.
You normally name these shows, so I'm going to...
Go for it.
I'm going to go for it.
I like that.
Okay, so this is the Two Matts, episode 13, Sleepy Joe or Doo-Lally Don. Enjoy.
Enjoy.
So, Matt, what are we talking about this week?
Well, I think we have to talk a bit about Joe Biden because a lot of the news has focused on him this week in various ways. And I guess the first thing that arose was when he was doing a trip around the world, including the G20, he went to Vietnam. And in Hanoi on Sunday evening, he gave a press conference, which I'm afraid to say, because I'm nothing against the guy,
let me pause you for a moment. When you say you've nothing against him, I have read your Evening Standard column.
Yeah, no, well, I mean,
you make this litany of things you've got against him quite clear.
Well, more in sorrow than in anger, because
yes.
I think he is now reaching a point of where it's clear that his decline is not just that of age, but it's cognitive, it's psychological.
Well, let's spell it out in plain terms. Is he going senile?
I think he is, and I think it's not just age, because we know that dementia can hit people from their 30s onwards, mostly 50s, 60s onwards.
Yeah.
So he's 80, but Michael Heseltine's 90, and he's perfectly lucid.
As is my dad is as sharp as a tack.
Exactly.
Yeah,
so
90,
I actually think that although the age thing has become massively politicized, that's not the key question. So I don't know if our producer Matt Hill has got a clip of
the evidence
of the latest evidence. Unfortunately,
I met with his number 2 person here in India today. I don't. Anyway, I just think that there are other things on leaders' minds, and they respond to what's needed at the time. And look, nobody likes having, but I tell you what, I don't know about you, but I'm going to go to bed.
And it is painful and horribly, the performance was cut off by his aides, which is a great indignity for a person who's given great public service. He's been vice president. He beat Trump, which is the service we should never, ever, ever forget. He beat Trump in 2020. However, there is a legitimate question now, I think, about his cognitive, psychological ability. Is he going senile? The other day in Connecticut, this was in June, he ended a speech with "God Save the Queen."
That's right. It was a bit mad, yeah.
On the day of the Nashville school shooting, he came down and started rambling about ice cream,
chocolate chip ice cream.
It's strange. He's talked about Putin twice being at war with Iraq. Clearly, his cognitive function is declining fast. Now, what does that mean? It means the Democrats are panicking. Biden is not disposed to step down. He's made it very clear he wants to beat Trump.
Yeah.
If he thinks Trump is going to be the candidate, he will stay in place. So that in order to get rid of him, Vice President Kamala Harris and half of the cabinet would have to use the 25th Amendment of the US Constitution to unseat him, which is in a year leading up to an election is disastrous.
The 25th Amendment was conceived after Kennedy was assassinated, right? Because there was a clear concern about what you do about the transfer of power in an emergency, and it covers, the death of a president, and
most of it's just common sense.
But this section, and the great irony is, or the great coincidence, is that the 25th Amendment was also being talked about in deposing Donald Trump.
Oh yeah,
4 years ago.
I mean,
being out of control and
deranged. I mean,
yeah.
the in the piece you talked about, I said, there's a kind of the real horror in this is you've got a choice between deranged criminality, and advancing senility. Right?
Yeah.
Now, obviously, given forced choice, obviously I want Biden to win.
Yeah.
But there is a to be unsentimental and sort of clear-eyed about it, there is a problem about having the leader of the free world in this cognitive condition. We know Reagan in the second term was already beginning to exhibit the signs of
dementia.
Alzheimer,
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
And he was younger.
He was 77 when
both
he finished.
Both of them.
That's right.
Both Trump and Biden.
Yeah.
So, there are issues around it. I think Biden will be the candidate, and I think Trump will be the candidate. And I think, I think Democratic strategists are just they look at the alternatives: Kamala Harris, Gavin Newsom, the governor of California, Robert F. Kennedy Jr., the sort of maverick anti-vaxxer. None of these people have a chance against Trump. So it does boil down to a kind of global fingers crossed.
The other side to the coin is that if you are a Republican who is, a diehard Republican, but fearful of what Trump means for the Republican Party, but your alternative is a guy that looks like he's, the Sleepy Joe prophecy is coming to fruition, it's going to harden you towards Trump, isn't it? It's going to make you think, well, I might as well give Trump a go.
It will, and also the Biden strategy at the moment depends on the fairly large number of undeclared independents, and the soft vote among ethnic minorities for Biden hardening up by election day in November 2024. And obviously, anything that makes that turnout smaller raises Trump's chances of, the nightmare scenario of Trump being re-elected. So, these are things to bear in mind. Then I think we move to an issue on which it's clearer, certainly to me, which is Kevin McCarthy, the Speaker of the House, Congressman from California, on Tuesday evening announces an impeachment inquiry into Joe Biden. Now, just to be absolutely clear, an impeachment inquiry is not the same as an impeachment. It's an inquiry which is led by, the congressional committee forces. It's going to be overseen by James Comer. And it's to establish the case for an impeachment vote in Congress. Now, I'd be amazed if the inquiry didn't find something.
But can I just pause there for a second? Because is it not the first time? I mean, there haven't been that many impeachment inquiries, but the first time where it's like a fishing expedition, this, isn't it? There doesn't even seem to be the kernel of a
There is no
ground.
smoking gun. I mean, there has been a lot of investigation of the Biden family. This is. I mean, at the heart of it is Biden's son, Hunter, who's often sort of treated in discussions as if he's about 20. He's actually 53.
Yeah.
And he has had problems with drugs, and he has had problems with taxes, and with a firearm, but nothing major. And he's not Biden. He's not his father. The broad allegation is that Hunter used his father's name to drum up business in his various dealings with foreign businesses. Well, of course he did.
Yeah.
But that doesn't amount to the high crimes and misdemeanors that you need the test to treason, bribery, or high crimes and misdemeanors.
And it's certainly not Joe Biden's fault necessarily.
No, there is. I mean, the key is that there is not a scintilla of evidence of Joe Biden having received any financial gain from his son's business dealings.
So the sins of the son shouldn't necessarily be visited upon the
why?
father.
So you have to ask, why are they doing this? Well, the first is that the Republicans, and especially the sort of wingnut crazy Republicans, want anything that suggests that Biden is not the legitimate president. And the I word, the impeachment word, it keeps the base happy in that respect. The second thing, which is a bit inside baseball but is very important, is that McCarthy has real problems himself, Speaker of the House. He is facing being deposed himself.
He scraped in to
he's
start with.
Barely scraped in,
yeah.
and he's there's all sorts of rows about his negotiations with the Democratic Biden-led government over budgets, and the right want to, tear him to pieces. And this was McCarthy's desperate sort of offering, olive branch, saying, "Look, I'm going to get Biden impeached." And Matt Gaetz from Florida, is a congressman from Florida who's leading the opposition to McCarthy, immediately gave a speech saying that it's not enough, you're still on, probation. So McCarthy's doing this from a position of internal weakness. So that's worth prayer. But I think the most egregious aspect of it all, and the one that one hopes doesn't gain any traction, is they're trying to establish a kind of phony moral equivalence between, some possibly sketchy business dealings by Hunter Biden that almost certainly didn't involve his father at all, and the fact that Trump is facing 91 charges
for insurrection.
I mean, just
treason.
And it's a classic distraction move. So I just went, I checked out last night, just this week, right? Kind of Trump trial news, right? Okay, in the federal, this is just a few for instances. I could go on forever. In the federal case brought by special counsel Jack Smith against Trump is demanding the recusal of the judge, Tanya Chutkan, right? 2, he's seeking a move of the Georgia case, which is the big one, to federal courts. I doubt he'll succeed, but of course he wants it in federal court so he can pardon himself.
Exactly.
3, there's a possibility of moving the date of the Manhattan trial, the hush money trial, because of the various, he's in so many trials that actually it's turning into a diary nightmare. 4, there's a case brought by Citizens for Responsibility and Ethics on the basis that using the 14th Amendment of the Constitution, that insurrection is a disqualification for office. And we're going to hear a lot more about that argument. Okay. 5, and I promise you this is the last, the journalist E. Jean Carroll's, who you may remember in May, won a civil case showing that Trump was liable for sexual assault against her. She's got a defamation lawsuit against Trump, and Trump is seeking a delay in that. So the reason I go through that rather sort of prosaic list is just to say that's just this week.
Yeah, the guy's not going to have time to run the country.
That's a week in the life of Trump.
Yeah.
So when you compare that to what is being alleged against Biden, which is still very vague. There is no smoking gun.
Yeah.
And it was interesting, I think the FT reported that Newt Gingrich, who of course was heavily involved with the impeachment of Clinton, said this could backfire. Newt Gingrich is not a liberal. He's not on the moderate wing of the Republican Party, although, what's a moderate in the world of MAGA, it's very hard to know. But, when Newt Gingrich says, be careful, you should be. So one hopes that this all backfires. The sort of worst case scenario is that it does form a vague sort of moral equivalence in people's minds that both candidates are both crooked, which is very much Trump's hope and objective, and he's been in contact with his allies in Congress behind all this.
And Trump would say, who do you want? Do you want Sleepy Joe the crook, or do you want Clever Don the crook?
That's the problem, is that, and this goes back to the let's say at very minimum, the kind of general, the mien and manner of the two candidates is that Trump is deranged, but he's full of vigor and energy.
Yeah.
And Biden is a fading force, and it's so performative.
You wonder whether politics. It will come down to a matter of self-confidence in
That's the problem, is that whereas in 2020, I felt Biden, his kind of he's not blue collar by origin, but he has a sort of commonality with blue collar America. oh, come on, man. He in the debates in 2020, he rose up. He wouldn't put up with Trump's nonsense.
Yeah.
Can one be sure he'll do the same in 2024? Less confident. One hopes so. The hope is that Trump enrages him and brings up that sort of deep campaigning spirit.
Yeah.
But it's less of a certainty.
So let's just cast forward a little bit. Let's cross our fingers and say Biden defeats Trump in 24. Then you do, and let's say your thesis is right, that his mental faculties are declining, and that's going to be progressive and it will get worse. And, you'll find yourself in a situation in 25, 26, where you have the leader of the free world, the leader of the most powerful nation on the planet, who is ostensibly Gaga, potentially. Then what? Kamala Harris?
Yeah, well, I mean, then the problem is significant, but less terrifying.
Right.
In that, I think people would agree that Kamala Harris has not shown herself to be a sort of inspiring.
Has she done anything?
Not ostensibly, and people seem to take against her. There may be a race element in that. I suspect there is.
A bit of race and misogyny thrown in.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
So, she might not be the most inspiring person to take over midterm, but the great premise to your question, Matt, is that Trump has been defeated again.
Yes.
And that would mean he'd been defeated twice. And I think even the MAGA base, the absolute hardcore, although, of course, they'd say it'd been rigged again and all that, I think by 2026, 7 or whatever you're talking about, I think by then the Republican movement would have moved on.
Well, he might well be in chokey by then.
He might well be in chokey.
Unpardoning himself,
and
unable to.
I think that the kind of arc that he's followed since his actual defeat in 2020 is it was rigged and I can win for you again in 2024. If he doesn't, I do think that given this is being done according to the rules of showbiz, the Trump show gets axed.
Yeah.
So while in actual governmental terms you're dead right that the incapacity of a president midterm would be a problem. Presidents have died midterm, or Nixon had to resign midterm. I mean, it's happened.
Yeah.
And I think that the system would be able to cope with that.
Okay. Before we go to a break, some president age questions for you. A little quiz. Okay. So, the median age of U.S. presidents, what would you take a shot at? Total.
60-something?
No, 55. Much
Really?
younger than I
younger.
thought. The whole
Younger.
procession, those early guys, they were all 52,
I suppose
54,
they were,
55, yeah. The youngest ever person to become president?
Kennedy.
No.
Obama.
No. Theodore Roosevelt at 42.
Oh, really?
Yeah, but after McKinley was assassinated.
Okay.
So the youngest person to ever be elected as president was John Kennedy.
Was John Kennedy.
And he also holds the slightly grimmer record of being the youngest president at the end of his tenure, because he was only 46, having gone in at 43. Of course, he was assassinated. Theodore Roosevelt, the youngest ever former president, aged 50, and Ronald Reagan, as we said earlier, the oldest president at the end of his tenure, but will be superseded by Joe Biden, whatever happens in 24.
Even if he stopped today.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And the longest retirement of any US president.
Oh, that's a good one. Carter?
Jimmy Carter.
Yeah.
He's been retired now.
He's in hospice care now.
He is, but he's 98 years old. He's also the oldest living president ever. And he has been retired for 42 years, which makes me feel absolutely ancient.
It's very funny. I interviewed him in Vienna at a UN Human Rights Congress in the 90s, and he was fantastic, charming.
Yeah.
I mean, has been the absolute example of what you should do if you've been head of government of a huge power, which is turn it to good.
Yes.
And he's spent that time, public service on a global scale.
He
awesome.
seems to be a wholly good individual.
He's just a phenomenally nice.
Isn't it a shame that that's not how he was received at the time? Really,
I think it was difficult because he was following the disaster of Watergate.
Yeah.
But at a time when America was still deeply paranoid about the Soviet Union, and Carter was seen as soft and not up to the job, and the Iranian embassy siege just decked him.
Yeah.
But he was a great statesman. He really was.
I'm trying to think any of our recent rash of leaders that could emerge as greater after power than they were before.
Oh, Gordon Brown.
Gordon Brown, yeah.
Gordon Brown is I think now a really significant global figure. I mean, during the pandemic, he was everywhere and all over. I mean, not physically, but he was. The good work he did on the very limited, sadly, vaccine sharing was phenomenal.
Yeah.
And his books about climate change and how to deal with crises, and also just in person, he's at ease with himself now.
Yeah.
In a much, I think he is someone who will be very significant. And I think if Labour win, I hope I know they talk to Blair a lot.
Yeah.
I hope they talk to Gordon as well.
I think that's right.
Because, this is a guy who understands the global music, if you like. He understands how the whole planet works. Yeah. And, he did a great job, by the way, in getting us through the financial crash.
He absolutely did. And, of course, Liz Truss will be better after her power.
By definition.
But, I mean, she couldn't be any fucking worse, could she? So.
I mean, although we wait, and I'm sure we'll speak about this on the podcast when with impatience, we finally get hold of her book.
The book.
What's
it called?
It's called something like
10 years to save the world.
I mean, again, to speak of deranged, the deranged lettuce, it's amazing.
Right. Anyway, very good. After the break, we are going to return with another all-powerful American. So it's turned into a bit of a US-themed show.
Yeah.
Join us after the break, folks. This week's episode is sponsored by the New European. We've got a special deal this week for new subscribers, where if you join, you can join for just £1 a week for all of our digital content. Or if you like to get the newspaper delivered to your house every Wednesday as a subscriber, you can have that for just another £1 a week. So that's £2 a week. And we'll give you a free signed copy of Rory Stewart's new book, Politics on the Edge.
It's a real bargain.
Which is worth 25 quid, I think.
Yeah.
So, and it's signed by the man himself. So go to theneweuropean.co.uk/2matts. That's the number 2, MATTS. And like I say, every new subscriber will get a copy of Rory Stewart's brand new hardback book signed by the author, Politics on the Edge. And now back to the show. So, Matt, another all-powerful America, maybe the most powerful American if you believe some people.
It's true. So this week,
I say American because he's not even bloody American.
No,
isn't
he's
he?
South African. But I mean,
yeah.
he spends most of his time in America. Elon Musk has had his biography by Walter Isaacson published this week. And why does this matter? Well, because having your biography written by Walter Isaacson is a bit like having a statue made of you. It's he's, and I think this is one of the reasons, by the way, that Musk agreed to be the subject of a Walter Isaacson biography. He had listed Isaacson's biography of Benjamin Franklin as one of his favorite books. And, the other people that have been the subject of Walter Isaacson's biographies include Einstein, Leonardo, Steve Jobs, and so clearly Elon Musk sees himself as a worthy member of that. And
by the way, the cover,
pantheon,
which I've only just seen just that second as you held it up, is absolutely striking how similar it is to the cover of the Steve Jobs one, where Steve Jobs used that very famous pose where he had his index finger just touching his chin and his lip, and it's become a sort of iconic tech guru pose. Well, for people obviously just listening, you've got a very, very clear photo of Elon Musk staring straight down the camera, beautifully lit, beautifully made up, and his hands almost in prayer, just touching his chin like this. It's very kind of that iconic, legendary image, isn't it? Almost like Karshavotta kind of portrait.
I'm a Roman emperor, basically.
Yes, it's exactly Marcus Aurelius, yeah.
So it's stuff full of details, much of which have been gone over in the press, have been gutting it like crazy. But one of the things that struck me as both comic but also a bit scary, we knew that Elon Musk loved Douglas Adams's Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy.
Yeah.
But this biography makes clear that when we say love, I mean loved. So he talks about how he had a very unhappy childhood. His father, Errol, very brutal father, bullying, demeaning the young Elon.
Yeah. Well, there was a great sort of sense of it, him being bullied by gangs of kids in South Africa, but his dad being on the bully side. The
dad saying, no son of mine, and so on.
Yeah.
So, he tells Isaacson that The Hitchhiker's Guide, which for people who, haven't encountered it, is a kind of comic science fiction. There are 5 books. It started as a radio series in the late 70s. The first book, I think, was published in 1979 and the last in the late 90s. And it's about a human being called Arthur Dent, an Englishman, very Englishman, who gets rescued by his best friend Ford Prefect, who he doesn't know is from Beetlejuice 7 and is a reporter for the great guidebook, The Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy, and they get the Earth is destroyed to make way for an intergalactic bypass, and they go off on great adventures, which include trying to find out the answer to life, the universe, and everything, which is, as people may or may not know, 42. The problem is that no one knows what the question is. Now, so this, Elon Musk, who emerges from the book as someone who is either in demon mode, as Grimes, the mother of some of his children, he has 11, puts it, or goofy mode, and he quite often, after shouting at someone for half an hour, will show Isaacson or someone else a Monty Python sketch on his phone, which is very strange. Yeah. But he's really fixated by Douglas Adams's world.
Do you know? Just to cut in briefly, I've only got one Douglas Adams story.
Oh, go for it.
Which was I used to be a tech reporter for the Daily Mirror when the internet was just starting. I had a column called Kelly's Eye, with the eye like the letter I. Douglas Adams must have been doing some tech game or something like this, and was living in California at the time. And Microsoft or somebody said, "We're launching this game. Do you want to come over and interview Douglas Adams? As why he's doing it and all of this, talk about whatever." So I got on a plane, flew 11 hours to Los Angeles, checked into my hotel, and this was in May 2001, and got a text from the publicist saying, "Unfortunately, the interview's off. Douglas just died yesterday."
That is a good excuse, isn't it?
So I was nearly the last person to interview Douglas Adams, but not quite.
And you were the first not to.
I was the first person not to interview Douglas Adams.
It is a claim to fame, amongst your many claims to fame. That's, it was one of those moments, wasn't it? Because he was only 49. There'd been no hint.
Was he only 49?
Yeah,
Good
he was extremely young, and reading the Isaacson book and picking up on this, I thought, what a shame it is that Adams isn't around to, because what he did, I think, was he's the Woodhouse of the tech era. I think the P.G. Woodhouse of the tech era, and he turned into comic novels and comic plays. Actually, maybe Matt Hill, our producer, has got a clip he can play from. There was, I think, a stage adaptation of the book.
Oh, brilliant.
What the hell happened?
Well, I was just saying, there's this improbability drive switch here, you see, and I just pressed it.
Where are we, Trillian?
Well, exactly where we were, I think.
Then what happened to the missiles?
Well, according to this screen, they've just turned into a bowl of petunias and a very surprised-looking whale.
And an improbability factor of 8,767,128 to 1 against.
That's very good thinking, Earthman. You know that? You just saved our lives.
Oh, it was nothing, really.
Was it? Oh, well, forget it then.
My favourite line from the whole thing was early on, where they were lamenting the destruction of Earth for this superhighway, and in the lamentation he said, of course, God had won a design award for his work on the Norwegian fjords.
It's really, really good. I mean, it's interesting how much it does suffuse the book. So Grimes says that one of the reasons that they call their second baby, Y, the full name is Andromeda Synthesis Story Musk. So probably Y is better. Is that, as we know, Elon Musk, who changed Twitter's name to X, loves letters Y, but he also loves the question why. And Grimes is quoted as saying, Elon always says that we need to figure out what the question is before we can know the answers to the universe. And it's funny because initially you think how charming, but then you think, actually, I wonder what Douglas Adams, were he alive today, would make of the fact that his books, which were written to enlighten and to amuse, have been turned into a kind of Bible by this multi-billionaire maniac. I mean, when he sent up one of his Tesla Roadsters in 2018 on the Falcon Heavy test flight, and in the glove compartment, he put a copy of The Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy.
Did he really?
And he put a sign on the dashboard that read what appears on the cover of the book in the plays and in the series and the books. Don't panic.
Don't
right
panic.
now, on one level, that's charming. On another, it's slightly deranged.
Yeah.
And I think it's on many levels, it's a great shame that Douglas Adams isn't around to satirize the tech moguls, because he was the great guru of the personal computer age, which happened on his watch, I guess. And he foresaw in the guide both the Kindle, which didn't, I think, arrive until 2007, and the astonishing rise of audiobooks, because, of course, the book talks in his novel. So he would have been just so fantastic on these characters like Elon Musk and Mark Zuckerberg and Jeff Bezos, who really step out of the pages.
They
of the
really do,
Hitchhiker's
don't
Guide. I think his loss was obviously just not a loss personally, but it was a loss to the culture, because these people deserve to be satirized. And one of the things that comes out of the Isaacson book is the sense of almost demented seriousness about what he's doing.
Well, do you think we, as a society, as a civilization now, take individuals like this far too seriously? Do we?
No, I wish it were so.
Well, maybe I phrased that badly. What I mean is, do you think that the way we think, our ambitions, our aspirations, our dreams, are they the dreams of individuals like Elon Musk? Have we allowed them to overtake more common dreams, perhaps?
I certainly agree with that. And I think that, people like Zuckerberg and Elon Musk have become kind of techno Gatsbys, if you like, that we aspire to. And their definition of public service is not public service. It's just huge accumulation of uncontrollable wealth,
but also mad dreams
and
to go to Mars, to colonize Mars.
Okay, another extraordinary detail in the book is that every week, Musk has a meeting that sometimes runs up to 2 hours, called Mars Colonizer, and at this meeting, he and his a particular group, God knows of whom, on his staff, sit and talk about what the society they're going to build on the surface of Mars will be like. Will it be a democracy? What will the cities look like? How will we organize currency? What about the food? What will the robots do? How will decision make? Now, this is deranged, but also it tells you how he sees himself and the world in which he operates, which is that he's the person who's going to sort out interplanetary colonization. And to quote Monty Python, upon whom he apparently depends, in the Holy Grail, when the peasant meets King Arthur and says, "I'm the king," and the anarchist peasant says, "Well, I didn't vote for you," right? Well, none of us voted for Elon Musk, and yet it's been the source of considerable controversy in the last few days. Is one of the things in the book is the extent to which he deprived or didn't deprive the Ukrainian army of internet access while it was trying to attack in the Eastern Russian forces. And Musk said he didn't want total war to break out. Well, I think that would come as some news to the Ukrainians.
But bizarrely, in the telling of that, I found, because the story broke that Musk had switched it off, and then the story became
that wasn't what had happened.
No, I'd never switched it on.
Because he didn't
want to enable the Ukrainians to sink the Russian fleet, basically. And strangely, I kind of followed his logic on that in that moment. If he had switched it off to favour or to prevent the Ukrainian assault on the Russian, that would have been a wholly different story, I think. But to go back to the earlier point, I do wonder, has there ever been a time in civilization where individuals have so kind of warped the whole ambition of humanity, you know, and why, you know, why
That's the point.
Why
That's
isn't
the
he
point.
having a 2-hour meeting about, you know, eradicating child poverty, or having a 2-hour meeting every week about making sure that there's clean water for everybody in Africa? You know, so things that would make a tangible, you know, he talks about, you know, interplanetary colonization. We can't make this bloody planet work. Never, you know, let's just make this one work before we move on to Mars.
So much of it is to do with whim, isn't it?
Yeah.
So for whatever reason, Bill Gates, Microsoft founder, has concentrated on climate crisis, health in the developing world, and so on. He and his ex-wife Melinda Gates, their foundation has done a lot of work, but that was just their choice, right? Zuckerberg, Bezos, Musk, they really do what they want. And when I say that, I don't mean in the way that the very wealthy have always done what they want.
Yeah.
Not in the F. Scott Fitzgerald sense of, you know, the very rich are different.
Yes.
They've always been different.
Yeah.
I'm talking here about unrestrained power, and I don't think national democracies or global institutions have yet come to terms with how much we depend on these guys. I mean, we talked on a previous episode about a Ronan Farrow piece on Musk in the New Yorker, which listed the number of American departments that depend upon Elon Musk's goodwill. Yeah. Which is terrifying.
And we've touched on it in the past about the enormous influence that a company like Google has enjoyed.
Yes.
You know, because two guys created something very clever that instantly, exponentially grew as a business and was borderless, and there was nothing a nation could really do to prevent its grip on advertising revenues, on search results, on the way, you know, literally helping control how people think and the stuff they find, all under the guise of ultimate altruism. You know, do you remember their first initial catchphrase was "Do no evil"?
Do no evil, yeah, absolutely.
But you could make a good case that Google has perpetrated more evil than many other multinational corporations through the way that they have controlled thought and sought to control news agendas and also their compliance with China as well, which they're almost uncontrollable.
It's corruption 10x.
Yes.
Because corruption on that scale is more than any or almost any head of government can do.
And the thing that struck me, Matt, so just the point about Google, because I've met their very top brass, and they've got some super smart people and people with really good intention, but they all buy into it. You know, they all believe they are doing the right thing, and there's nobody there to say, wait a minute, can you see what's happening? Slow down, stop this. You know, look at the effect of what you're doing over here.
And I think it's interesting that how this then leads on to AI, because understandably, the kind of way we're seeing AI at the moment is through the prism of Terminator, if you like. You know, we're terrified that AI is going to get conscious and it's going to turn into death robots and kill us all, right? Which is not a ludicrous thing to worry about, given the exponential speed at which AI is improving. But I'm afraid I'm a bit more cynical about it, which is, hold on a second, who is actually controlling the AI? It's all the same people. You know, Musk has his own AI company, so does Zuckerberg and so on. They are scraping the internet for data that can inform, you know, ChatGPT has kind of blown up because people are using it and going, this is incredible. This is going to be, again, unless we're very careful, yet another and much more powerful form of technology in the hands of a tiny group of people. Yeah. And no one is, you know, we're talking about AI regulation in terms of what AI can do, and that's good. But what we're not talking enough about is who in the end, because someone always does, is owning this. Who's getting the money from it? Who's exercising the power? Where, you know, whom, as Lenin said. And I don't think there's anything like enough of that in the new. There's a, you know, it's a very, in some ways, very exciting debate being had about AI at the moment. But I'm afraid I always want to know, you know, who's the person putting the code in, and who's the person will be inevitably raking. You know, one of these guys is going to be the first trillionaire on the back of AI. And that takes you to a level of wealth that takes you way ahead of almost all nation states in the world, and no one is doing a thing really to stop it.
And it's the thing that always terrifies me is it's always the unforeseen consequences of these things. We're sitting here talking about AI and what will it mean, and there are some kind of obviously terrifying potential, but there are also some
good things.
Some good things. Maybe AI could cure cancer, or could solve malaria, whatever it might be. So there's all that. But just as, for instance, just to pick a topic close to my heart, the internet and the rise of these huge multinational corporations that could serve people information, in a way that they'd never received before. That was the death, really, or the beginning of the death of the local news industry in the UK. And when local news, for instance, suffers and dies and becomes a diminished operation, there's consequences to that as well. Councils start behaving badly. Life starts falling apart when you're on the fringes of society because you haven't got anybody, the fourth estate there on a local level, shouting for your cause, or being interested about misdemeanors from people who should be behaving better. So there are these consequences that echo out like the circles when you drop a stone in a pond, and it's unforeseeable, and there will be consequences to AI that we can't even imagine. Some will be amazing, I hope, but some will also be pretty catastrophic. How do you we need to put in some form of regulation before it starts tearing the house
And
up.
I think that the people like Zuckerberg and Musk, who've been very clever at saying, please regulate us, because they know that most governments, most legislators in the world don't have the expertise to regulate them effectively. And they're asking for quick regulation, which is very smart. Regulate us, please, because what you actually need is, I'd say royal commissions, that's silly, but you need detailed, high intensity, very careful examination of what the real problems are, rather than just a few rules saying let's make sure AI doesn't encourage terrorism, child porn, and things like that. All of which is, by the way, necessary.
A national or a multinational, in the case of the European Union, strategy around AI.
It has to be international.
No, I was listening, just totally different topic, but it came home to me the difference between the UK and say a nation like China when we're talking about the influx of Chinese electric vehicles now. And the guy on the Radio 4 Today program was saying, what you've got to understand is that the Chinese have had this as a deliberate strategy for 20 years now. Yeah. They've hoovered up all the rare earth minerals they need. They've developed the science. They've got all the factories. They've been building the batteries for 20 years. And now you've got these battery companies who are now building cars, and they're about to become the single biggest exporter of cars on the planet, and that's happened in the last 3 or 4 years. But he said, in comparison, the UK, everything's a tactical response. Oh, somebody's going to move their factory to France. Well, we'll give them 600 million quid to keep them there, and we'll invest in electric batteries in wherever it may be. But there's no strategy. It's all about tactics and very knee-jerk responses.
What is Sunak doing on AI? He's having a summit. Right?
Oh, come on.
Now, what does that mean?
Bloody conference. What a waste of time.
Have a conference.
What a waste of time.
What you need is a strategy. Although, the strategy he has at the moment is to, one hopes, lose the next election, which is, you have to give.
He's playing that one well.
He's playing a blinder.
Right.
So what did we not talk about?
What didn't we talk about?
Well, one thing I'd like to squeeze in a mention of, which is, as you know, I need hardly mention, and anyone who's watching on YouTube will be well aware, I see myself as a bit of a fashion maven. Thank you. And yourself.
Very Steve Jobs today with your black t-shirt.
I know. I've made the...
Before he got ill,
I've made the big, never mind the little black dress, I've made the big black t-shirt, a thing that the must wear. But I went to the preview of the Victoria and Albert Museum's mega exhibition on Gabrielle Chanel. And it's... joking aside, it's not a subject, couture is not a subject I know very much about or have a deep knowledge of, but it is stunning.
Is it?
Yeah, it is. I mean, it's they've managed to curate it brilliantly. It is fantastically organised for the layperson as well as the expert, and it's just visually mesmerising.
Right.
And what it made me think, actually, apart from what a terrific exhibition it was, and it's definitely one to make an effort to go and see. I know it's booked up for quite a while, but do go. is what a great era we are going through for museums. So, parking for a moment all the eBay scandal at the British Museum, you've got Tristram Hunt at the V&A knocking out the park. You've got Ian Blatchford at the Science Museum knocking out the park. You've got Nicholas Cullinan at the National Portrait Gallery doing so. And I just hope that, I have no hopes of this government because I don't think they care about culture, but I really hope that the next government understands how important this is to Britain, and not just in terms of its tourist value, although that's important, and its soft power, although that's important, but just to the nature of being British. And by the way, there are museums and galleries outside of London which are fantastic as well.
Amazing stuff, yeah.
So it really brought that home to me.
And also, I think something that we can be genuinely proud of.
Absolutely.
And, it's all free.
It is. It is incredible how much you can get for nothing.
To go into, I mean, obviously they have these
special things
that you have to pay for, but you can go into the Science Museum and you could spend all day ogling the most amazing things, and it's cost you nothing.
Absolutely
wonderful.
It's anyway. Do go see the Chanel exhibition, even if you don't care about couture. It's amazing,
brilliant. And one thing that I thought we could touch on is these dogs from America, these Bully XLs or XL Bullies. Which is it, by the way?
I think XL.
Is it XL Bully?
It sounds like a sort of a robot or a laptop.
I mean, they look
an aggressive laptop.
I mean, these things, when you see them, there's one on the street near where I live, and it looks absolutely terrifying. I would cross the street. But the question about, there seems to be an argument which is, it's the people, not the dogs. And I said, well, fine, okay, but why take the chance? If there are bad people out there, don't let them have a dog that can rip people to pieces in 60 seconds.
I feel very sorry for these creatures because they've been bred by bad actors.
Yeah.
For bad purposes.
Well, who the hell would want to own one of these things unless it was some kind of ego trip or macho thing?
But you've just answered the question.
Yeah.
I mean, I think unfortunately, that question is the same as who the hell watches Andrew Tate.
Yeah,
right.
Yeah.
Is who would want to own a dog that clearly is genetically programmed to attack?
Yeah.
And the answer is the kind of idiot that sits watching Andrew Tate YouTubes and imbibes that kind of phony machismo, and I think it's a great shame. But I'm afraid I agree with you that we can't have dogs like that prowling around neighbourhoods. It just isn't acceptable, and it's a very sad thing to observe.
Well, it is, because I think probably for some of the wrong reasons, in that she sees it as a kind of popular Daily Mail.
Yes.
Kind of campaigning point. Suella Braverman will ban them, and a lot of these dogs will get euthanized, and that's very sad. But honestly, I'd rather have 100 of these dogs euthanized than one kid being ripped to shreds by one of them. So
it's
fine.
A question of priorities. I mean, I'm a massive animal lover, cats and dogs, but I don't want killer dogs roaming the streets, and I bitterly hate the people that breed them and the people that buy them, and I hope they're ashamed of themselves. I'm afraid. Good
for you. Well, we'll end on a note of absolute agreement, as usual. Actually,
always. Occasional domestic, but
occasional.
Always.
We move on quickly.
Never
go to bed.
Never let
on
the
an
sun
argument.
go down on an argument on the two mats.
Those nights we phone each other late at night to kiss and make up over our fallings out.
Miss you.
Remember, folks, send us your questions and we will answer them definitively. We will be rolling out a second weekly question and answer episode later this month. So the address for all your questions is 2mats, that's the number 2, MATTS, at tnepublishing.co.uk. 2mats at tnepublishing.co.uk. And our special deal, remember, subscribe and get a free copy of Rory Stewart's wonderful new book, Politics on the Edge. Just head to theneweuropean.co.uk/2mats, and there's a link in the show notes. Thank you, as ever, to the third Matt, our producer, Matt Hill at Rethink Audio. And until next week,
it's goodbye from me.
And it's goodbye from him.
Goodbye.